Hi everybody, my name is Wes Adams. I'm here with Autodesk at the Education Summit in Los Angeles, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to Alex McDowell, Creative Director at 5D Institute. Alex is here today presenting a film called Upside Down. Alex, I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about what you're presenting today.
Well, I think the point of this presentation is to talk about, in a way, budget as much as anything. Is that there's a real misconception that the notion of virtual production, that the digital tool sets, that all the technology that we're using in kind of hybrid filmmaking is exclusively constrained to high-budget films. So everybody's heard about Avatar, they've heard about Alice in Wonderland, they've heard about Tintin. Those films are being talked about a lot because they are at the high end of the technology. But ever since we started working in a real digital space, and for me, since Minority Report, every single film I've worked on at any level of budget, we've scaled the technology to accommodate the film that we're making. Upside Down is an interesting example because it's a highly complex film. In the independent sector, because it's very much an independent film, it's a French, Quebecois co-production, shot in Montreal, and the budget was really constrained for the amount of work that was done. Heavily CGI, heavily hybrid, lots and lots of digital planning. And so it's an example I like to use to talk about the fact that the technology we're using is just a set of tools, and it's scalable. It's a film that if it had gone through the studio system would probably have had twice the budget, or would have been budgeted at twice the cost, let's say, and it might never have been made. That's almost become a mindset in the industry, that if it's a hybrid film, if it's a complex CGI film, it's just going to push the budget through the roof. And that actually constrains the imagination. That means a lot of people come around the table and start telling us what we cannot do because it's too expensive. What I'm interested in is what I can do. And I want the technology to liberate my imagination, to give me the ability to do anything that I can think of. And what we have to, I think, get our head around is that the technology now is at a level where it really is there to serve us as a tool set, and that our focus has to be, first of all, on how you push your imagination, knowing that there's really nothing that you can't make. Anything that you can think of, anything you can dream of, the ideas that we come up with can all be actualized now with these amazing tools that are available to us. But the tools don't automatically mean just because I'm using a digital tool set that therefore it has to cost an inordinate amount of money.
You said something amazing during your presentation. We have the technology, we need the imagination, and I think that's the theme of what you were telling us. What does it mean when you have the technology that it's there and it's reliable enough to be able to move beyond it and think of something that isn't just the capabilities of a tool or the budgetary restrictions?
Well, for someone like myself, I mean, the huge advantage I have is that I'm completely ignorant, that I know nothing about what the limitations of the technology are. So I never think about what cannot be done. I just think about kind of what can be done. And I think and that's just a product of the fact that I wasn't brought up trained in digital tools, and so in some ways that's actually been a big advantage. I've been able to just get to know what the general capability of a certain kind of tool is, and then say, why can't it do this? I want to do that, why can't it do that? And I've never yet met a wall that couldn't be pushed through when it's been asked that question. I work with fantastic creative artists who work with tools that I don't even know what they're called, let alone how to make them work. But my job, I think, is to say, this is the image that's coming out. This is the kind of imaginary space that we are developing collaboratively. The director wants it to be this way. The cinematographer's asking for this. Myself as a designer, why can't, I want it to do this thing. I want the environment to work in this way. And that's a fantastically symbiotic relationship. Every single time I've sat and worked with in close, and it's more and more collaborative, to work with people whose particular skills are entirely on the technology side, that is becoming a more and more exciting collaboration, because the technologists or the people who really understand the tools are totally stimulated by being pushed. So we're pushing each other. The technology is saying, hey, look, you can now do this. And then we as designers, as creators are saying, oh, if you can do this, then can you also do that?
Based on all these themes that you've got coming together about moving beyond the technology, about being as creative as you can, what is it that you would recommend to students?
First of all, film may not look like film in 5 years' time. Animation may not look like animation in 5 years' time. So you have to open your mind. You have to say, I love the idea of film and film history, but I have to be open to where that's heading. I have to be open to what may change when the game space, interactive media, and the film production space collide. What is that going to turn into? What kind of narrative space is that going to turn into? And ultimately, we are all storytellers. Working in narrative media, fundamentally, you're dealing with how to tell stories. And how to tell stories is being driven by the requirement of the story first, and everything else follows. So if the story requires that we're in a science fiction future, if the story works absolutely well with two people in an apartment block in downtown LA, that's absolutely great too. That is the right way to support the story. So story first, and then everything else follows. And the reason we talk about world building now is that the best possible way to know the correct environment to put around a story is to think about it as a world. Every story takes place as a line that progresses through a world, just in the way that we walk, from our home to work or go on vacation. And the journeys that we make in our everyday life are lines of narrative that intersect in multiple ways within a world, within our own particular world. And so all we're doing is saying, well, there's a direct correlation for every single story with that idea of developing a world that has its own interior logic, that has its own inhabitants, that has its own cultural conditions. And once we know those conditions, once we develop the rules within which all of those conditions exist, the story follows, actually.
I heard that you're working on Man of Steel, the new Superman film. What can you tell us about that?
Not a great deal. We finished a few months ago now in actual physical production. It's now in post. But it was a wild ride. I worked on it for about a year and a half. Most specifically, what is interesting probably to this audience is that we used technology to the very extreme limits in order to build Krypton. And Krypton is a world that we haven't seen before, required a very specific set of technology tools to be able to visualize what it looks like. And we used it throughout the process. So we did a massive amount of digital design. We did a massive amount of work with Mudbox, with Maya, with Motion Build, with a huge amount of visualization and prototyping of these very complicated story spaces and Krypton. But we also pushed that out into the maker space. So we were using rapid prototyping at a massive scale. We built entire sets with CNC. We rapid prototyped at full scale an enormous quantity of the sets in the film. And I think it's as close as I've come to an absolutely correct virtual production process, where we're using the tools to completely support the storytelling in every step of the way, and a very non-linear collaborative space where everybody was plugging into it, where these very complicated ideas were being developed visually with the director's input and the cinematographer's input and the visual effects input and the designer's input in a central space, enhancing all of that, pushing it out into practical manufacturing in every way. I think it's going to be an interesting film, and I think it's pushing the limits. And maybe it's, for me so far, the highest level proof of concept of the fact that this new technology supported imagination space really works.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Alex McDowell, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.